This is Todd-o-phonic Todd, and I'm here with Cherie Currie, former lead singer of the Runaways. She's got a new solo album out on Blackheart Records called Boulevards of Splendor. Now, Cherie, on the East Coast in the 1970s, we knew of Rodney Bingenheimer and his club, Roddy's English Disco, but another place in Los Angeles that was very important to you and the scene as well was called the Sugar Shack, and it was an underage club. Can you describe what a night at the Sugar Shack was like?
Well, it was a small little club in what we would think of now as like a little mini mall. In fact, it's a pizzeria right now. After it closed down, it became a dry cleaners, and now it's a pizzeria that my publicist and I and Brad Elterman just went to have a slice of pizza not too long ago. But anyway, it was a club where you had to prove you were under 21 to get in. It played all the glam rock, Elton John, David Bowie, Suzi Quatro, Alice Cooper, The Sweet, all those cool bands. This was really before disco. So it had a bar that served colas, and it had a pool table upstairs, and it was really just for kids to kind of be themselves and dress up crazy and have some fun.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned David Bowie, and you were a massive fan performing Lady Grinning Soul at a school talent show, and seeing the Diamond Dogs tour was actually the first concert you attended. But Suzi Quatro, whom you also mentioned, was also a huge inspiration. How pivotal was it to you and the other members of the Runaways that there was a girl dressed in leather playing rock and roll and having success with it?
Well, you know what? First, I want to say that I won the talent show doing 1984. A Lady Grinning Soul, which is a great song, was a Floria Sigismonte idea. But Suzi Quatro was just huge. She was immense for me and for Joan Jett and the rest of the girls as well. You know, she was the only person out there doing this. And she was showing that not only could she do it well, but exceptionally well. And she just shined. She shined like the star that she still is. And so Joan kind of pretended to be Suzi. She was so completely mesmerized by her completely that she really pretended to be Suzi while I pretended to be David Bowie until we figured out who the heck we were. You know, we were too young to know at that time. Yeah.
Now, Cherry Bomb was written, I believe, at your audition by Joan Jett and Kim Fowley, and it was largely written for you and became somewhat of a personal theme song in those days, correct?
Yeah, it was absolutely written by me. I mean, written for me. Kim, and so I took care of him later on in his life before he passed away, and I really got to see how brilliant a songwriter he is. I mean, stuff just came out of his mouth. Right to pay. If you didn't have a tape recorder or could write fast, you'd miss something, and it never had to be changed. I mean, he was absolutely phenomenal as a writer, and he would just point to Joan and say, "Now change the key here," and do. You know, it was like really, he was the orchestrator of these songs that he wrote either with Joan or with me and the other girls as well. But yeah, he wrote the song because I'd learned Fever from Suzi Quatro's album, and of course that didn't fly with the girls. So he wrote Cherry Bomb like in 20 minutes.
Yeah, and speaking of Fowley, it seems to me that there was one of the reasons some people pushed back on the Runaways was that they felt you guys were a vehicle for Fowley rather than what they would consider maybe an organic band. And I had Joan and Kenny Laguna on the show fairly recently when Joan's documentary came out, and they made a very good point about how, to cite one example, for the most part, people didn't treat the Sex Pistols as if they were a vehicle for Malcolm McLaren, even though he was probably involved in their career to the same extent that Kim was in yours. The combination of the Runaways being girls, along with your ages, seemed to be a potent 1-2 punch, kind of working against you and capturing respect from a lot of people. Did you get that sense at the time?
Well, of course. We were just too damn young. But the thing is the Runaways never would have happened if it wasn't for Kim. I mean, he was the only person with the vision. You know, the fact that when you think it didn't happen organically, It really did. He just happened to go out searching for kids doing rock and roll, girls that didn't even exist. So how does a bunch of teenage girls do that? You can't, especially when we don't drive.
Right.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
It was Kim that made this happen, and God bless him for it, and what other people think. I don't care that people just have way too much time on their hands if they're going to talk about, that the Runaways shouldn't be taken as seriously because we didn't organically fall together. That's almost like telling you that, you shouldn't do any online dating.
Right.
It's just like crazy. It's like, so there are some people that have great relationships that, if it wasn't for the internet, they never would have met. So, anyway, I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah, you did. And I also think history like that. I think at the time in the 70s when the band was out there putting out those albums and doing gigs, I think there was that sentiment at the time, but I think history has kind of removed that for the most part. And
well, yeah, and of course, all you have to do is put yourself in the position of some of these bands, some of these guys in their 20s, and all of a sudden, girls that are 15, 16, 17 are opening up for you. I mean, all you have to do is just think that and just go, whoa, I don't know if that would be something I would want. I wouldn't want a bunch of kids opening for me. What do you think this is? Some kind of circus act? You know what I mean?
Right.
So my 60-year-old brain sees it very different than my 16-year-old brain did. Mm-hmm. But I get it now. I get it.
Right. And along similar lines, I had Kathy Valentine from the Go-Go's on the show a couple of weeks ago, and Susie Quattro also played a huge role in her picking up an instrument, but seeing the Runaways was also an inspiration. And just last week on another program, Stephen McDonald from Red Cross was being interviewed, and he mentioned how impactful seeing the Runaways was to him, not so much in the fact that you were girls, more so that you were teenagers. So it turns out that the Runaways were not just highly influential to women, but to dudes as well, which was nice to hear.
And you know what? It isn't all male chauvinistic stuff. People just bought our record just because they liked the album cover, too. And then all of a sudden listen to the music and said, my God, these girls are real. I love this music. It was simple. It was something that anyone that wanted to pick up an instrument and learn how to play could do. And they could sing the songs. It's not like today where all you see is American Idol and The Voice that just really crushes a lot of people's dreams, in my humble opinion, because it's off the charts, impossible. So a lot of people that really are like the Bob Dylans of the world don't even fan the flames of their purpose to be here on this planet, because they just don't think that they could ever exist. And that, I think, is a shame, because it's very untrue. And that's the whole, herd mentality where people don't think for themselves anymore. And they need to. They need to follow their heart. They need to not ask people's opinions. And they need to do what they were born on this planet to do. Bottom line, period, over and out.
Hell yes, Cherie. Now, some of the difficulties that we discussed that you were facing here in the States, when the Runaways went to Japan, it was a different scene, and you didn't really encounter those problems. You were welcomed by screaming fans everywhere, right?
Well, you know what? The first Runaways tour was really rough. I mean, it was, a lot of Motel 6s. We went from town to town. It was months long. I mean, months. And, by the time I got home, we played like the Whiskey, and then we played the Starwood. But when we came back from that first tour, we went immediately to the Santa Monica Civic and sold that out. Mm-hmm. So within those several months, we were really getting a huge following in the U.S. But, as far as real airplay and stuff, it was there, but it was mainly on college radio stations. It was, we never had a hit with Cherry Bomb, but yet, they're using Cherry Bomb in major motion pictures now. We were a little bit before our time. But going to Japan, when we stepped off that airplane, was like the Twilight Zone. It was Beatlemania, and the Twilight Zone all rolled up into one, and we really realized that we had really done a great job.
Mm-hmm.
That all the tears and everything was worth it, you know?
Right, and some of the things that happened in Japan, not on stage, managed taking a toll on the band, with both Jackie and you eventually leaving. And during that time with the Runaways, your drug use built up and eventually overtook you in the midst of a burgeoning acting career. And it seems in some ways your teens and 20s were sort of reversed in terms of how they would be for most performers. In your autobiography, Neon Angel, you describe your teen years as, quote unquote, being more like Hollywood Babylon than Hollywood High. But then when you're in your 20s, you've got a different type of career and you're working retail, among other things.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, the thing is I didn't get clean and sober till 1984. I left the Runaways in 77, and I did late 77, and I was shooting Foxes and Jodie Foster, and I was doing the record with my sister at the same time. So, I mean, I continued with my drug addiction till 1984, when I actually realized that I was so out of control. And then when I got clean and sober, I wanted to know what it was like to be a normal person. I thought that was really important. You know, I didn't go and work retail because I absolutely had to. I could have stayed home and pretended to be some kind of silly rock star, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to know what it was like to be normal, because I had anything but a normal life. So I went and they just said, how much do you want to work at this store? And I said, is $2.50 an hour okay? And the guy said, oh, that's great, because actually I think minimum wage at that point was $3.25.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I worked my ass off, and then I became a assistant manager at a learner store. They walked in and wanted me to be an assistant manager. So I did that, and then I got into the recovery business. I was a tech at Coldwater Canyon Hospital, decided I wanted to do more than that, became a drug counselor. Mm-hmm. And then through that, I became an artist, because I had to sit with these kids in a classroom 2 hours a day, every day, and I started sketching. I ended up taking my drawings to Chrysler and Sloan as a children's, illustrator for children's books. And they asked me how long I've been drawing, and I said, I've been drawing a year. And they said, how's that possible? And I told them about the Runaways. And they said, we've been looking for our first young adult book, and this is it. So I walked in as an artist and walked out an author. And, it just kind of went from there, you know.
The Runaways movie starring Dakota Fanning as yourself was released in 2010. That was also when work began on Boulevards of Splendor. Did the film and the interest in it, the film and the interest it generated inspire you to go back to the studio again?
Well, actually, Joan asking me to open for her at the Pacific Amphitheater started all of this. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a band to open for her with, and Matt Sorum had just happened to call me to have me do some vocals on his now wife's record, and so I called him back to say I was sorry that I missed the record, and then I told him I need to put a band together to open for Joan, and he goes, I'll be your drummer. Mm-hmm. And then he put together this great band, and I brought my son on board, but and then after we opened for Joan, it was such a huge success that Matt just said, we got to make a record. And within a week, we were in his studio recording Roxy Roller.
Yeah, a song from the old Rodney's English Disco days. Now, there were a lot of people involved with the album, people like Billy Corgan, Brody Vale, Slash. Did you know most of the people involved before you started recording?
I knew of them, but no, I did not know them personally. Mm-hmm. That was Matt Sorum and his wonderful Black Album book. That he knew all of them, and they were very good friends of his. But the fact that they wanted to be involved and donated their time to this record was truly humbling to me. It really made me see that the Runaways really did mean something, and that I'm still just like with the movie. I mean, it's really quite astonishing to me that people cared that much. It's great.
Indeed. And what is the extent of Kenny Laguna's involvement with Boulevards of Splendor?
Well, Kenny was my manager at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But he's on the East Coast and touring with Joan constantly,
Right.
and Matt was producing this record. And so once we finished, Matt finished doing the production, I think it was 11 songs or whatever, then Kenny wanted me to do a few more, so he produced those, the bonus tracks, except for Queens of Noise. Kenny had produced those. But then after that, after I opened for Joan, I mean, there were no more shows or anything like that. So eventually, when it came time to re-sign with him, I didn't do that. And I decided just to go on the road myself and try to promote this record without a record.
Yeah.
Because I knew it was a great record. I didn't want to lose the opportunity, but unfortunately, you know, I mean, things just happen. At least I gave it a good go.
Right. Well, I think it just came out on digital platforms now, so I think a lot of people are going to be hearing it for the first time. It's a great record, and I appreciate your time with me today, Cherie, and best of luck to you, and thank you for all you've done, not just for the music, but the counseling and the art. It's a very impressive career.
Thank you, Todd. I really appreciate it. You be safe now.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.